So, I want you to imagine a text that is so perfect, like so cosmically precise, that if you were to change a single syllable or, even just shift the tense of one verb, it would completely unravel the entire universe that the text is describing.
Right. It's a level of precision that we just don't really encounter in everyday life.
No, not at all. But then I want you to imagine the ultimate author of that exact text deliberately, like intentionally erasing parts of it from the mind of his own chosen messenger.
It just sounds like a massive contradiction right out of the gate.
It really does. And today we're actually looking at how ancient scholars managed to reconcile that exact kind of ultimate divine paradox. Because, let's be honest, when you or I read a book or a legal document or even just like a really long email from a coworker, we skim.
Oh, absolutely. We read for the gist.
Yeah, we want the broad strokes.
Yeah.
But today we're doing the exact opposite.
We are, because we live in an era of executive summaries and, bullet points. We're so trained to just consume the macro level meaning and kind of discard the micro level mechanics. I mean, we almost never pull out the magnifying glass to examine the ink itself.
Right. We don't stop and ask why a specific word was chosen over a synonym.
Exactly. Or why a sentence was structured in the singular instead of the plural. But today, we really are pulling out the biggest magnifying glass we can find.
We really are. So welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We're going to be looking at a stack of incredibly dense historical theological texts. The overarching book is called The Concept of Abrogation and Prophetic Integrity in Islam.
And I should say, if anyone listening is currently bracing themselves for a really dry, multi-volume academic lecture, you can totally relax.
Yeah, please do. Our mission today is actually highly specific. We are not looking at the whole book. We're zooming in on a very precise, highly technical slice of this text.
Right. Specifically, we're looking at the third, roughly 16% of the source material.
Just a tiny chunk. And honestly, for anyone who loves language or psychology or just like critical thinking, this is arguably the most fascinating portion of the entire document.
Oh, without a doubt. We are focusing exclusively on a section the scholars call the Lataif.
Lataif.
Yeah, which translates roughly to subtle points or like refined points of linguistic and philosophical interpretation.
I love that. Subtle points.
It's great, right? These are the microscopic, almost atomic-level details that ancient scholars extracted regarding how divine laws change over time, which is a theological concept known as abrogation.
Now, as we unpack this for you today, I want to be super clear. Our goal here isn't to convert anyone or endorse a specific theology or, argue for any religious claims.
Right, absolutely not.
Whether you're a devout believer, a curious agnostic, or just a hardcore skeptic, we are simply acting as your impartial guides here. We're just walking through the architecture of these ancient arguments to see how human beings rationalized divine law.
And honestly, it doesn't matter what your background is. The way these scholars dissected language is just a complete masterclass in critical reading.
It really is. I mean, the architecture of the arguments is just the perfect way to phrase it.
Thanks. I mean, we really are kind of touring this ancient intellectual cathedral today.
Yeah. We're admiring how the linguistic bricks were laid,
Right, and how the conceptual arches support the weight of these massive existential questions. And we can do that completely regardless of whether we actually choose to worship inside the building.
Exactly. The level of precision these scholars applied is just staggering to me. They didn't just ask what the text said, they practically agonized over why it said it in that exact grammatical form.
They treated every single syllable as a completely intentional, universe-altering choice.
So let's just walk right through the front doors of that cathedral.
Let's do it.
The very first subtle point, the first latifa in this section of the source material, tackles something that sounds incredibly simple on the surface, but it very quickly turns into a massive philosophical paradox.
It really does. It's about the fundamental concept of the word better.
Right, so the source examines a specific verse, and this verse states that if a divine sign or ruling is abrogated, which just means it's canceled or lifted or replaced by God, the divine brings a new one that is better than the old one, or at least similar to it.
And the Arabic phrase they're accessing over here is nati bikairin minya, meaning we bring something better than it.
Okay.
And this seemingly innocuous phrase immediately sparked a massive, super complex debate among the scholars documented in the text.
Because they had to figure out what better actually means in a divine context, right?
Exactly.
Right.
How does an omnipotent being define betterment for a human society?
Wait, hold on. Because I feel like human nature has a very specific, almost universal default setting for the word better.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if I tell you I got a better schedule at work, you instantly assume I have to work fewer hours.
Yeah.
Or I get to sleep in on Fridays.
Right. Or if you say you got a better commute, I assume it means less traffic.
Exactly. We instinctively, like, almost biologically equate better with easier.
And that is the exact instinct that one camp of early scholars had. We naturally associate betterment with facilitation, with the lightening of our load.
Yeah, the removal of friction.
Exactly. And the source text breaks down this exact interpretation. A really significant group of scholars argue that better, in this divine context, must mean the new rule is practically easier on the people.
Okay, so it has to be lighter or more convenient.
Right, or it just must remove a previous burden.
But I'm guessing that didn't really hold up to scrutiny. I mean, if God is just making things easier and easier all the time, eventually the laws would just vanish into pure convenience.
Precisely, and that's exactly where the source introduces the counterargument. It heavily cites the renowned scholar Al-Qurtubi.
Okay, so what does Qurtubi say?
Well, Qurtubi steps into this debate and completely redefines the metric. He argues that better does not necessarily mean easier. Yeah. In fact, he argues that translating it as more beneficial is the vastly superior, far more accurate reading of the text.
Okay, more beneficial.
Right. He states that the divine manages the affairs of humanity based on what is in their ultimate, long-term best interest, not necessarily what is just lightest on their immediate natural dispositions.
I mean, I understand the more beneficial angle, but let me just push back on Qurtubi for a second here.
Go for it.
If a divine being is completely all-powerful, why not make the new rule beneficial and easy? Like, why does the upgrade have to include suffering or friction at all? Did the scholars address that?
They absolutely did, and they addressed it by looking at the reality of human development.
Okay.
Qurtubi essentially argues that profound benefit often fundamentally requires friction. And to prove this, the source text gives a really vivid, historically grounded example.
Which is?
The transition of the early Islamic fasting rules.
Oh, interesting. Okay, set the scene for us. What was the original rule?
Initially, when the early Muslim community was newly formed, they were obligated to fast only on a single specific day of the year.
Just one day.
Yeah, just one day, the day of Ashura.
Wow, okay.
So from a purely physical, logistical standpoint, that is incredibly easy. It's just a minor interruption to your annual routine.
Right, anyone can do that.
But then, the text explains, that ruling was abrogated. It was completely replaced by a new, sweeping command.
Which was the obligation to fast the entire month of Ramadan, right?
Exactly. 30 consecutive days of fasting from dawn until dusk without any food or water.
So, okay, from a purely human, physical perspective, jumping from fasting one day a year to fasting 30 days a year is just undeniably harder.
Exponentially harder.
Yeah, it's an exponential increase in difficulty. It is heavier, it's more physically taxing, it disrupts your sleep, your work, your entire social rhythm.
Right.
So if we apply that first group's definition, that better must mean easier, this new ruling fails the test completely.
It shatters the easier paradigm entirely. It is objectively worse for your immediate physical comfort.
Right.
But under Qurtubi's definition of more beneficial, it makes perfect philosophical sense.
Because of the spiritual payoff.
Exactly. The scholars argue that the entire month of Ramadan is better because it yields a far greater spiritual reward, a deeper communal discipline, and ultimately, a much more profound transformational benefit to the human soul.
It forces a level of introspection and empathy that a single day of fasting just simply cannot achieve.
Exactly. It's shifting the entire metric of quality from immediate physical comfort to ultimate spiritual utility.
I love this concept because it is so incredibly relatable, even outside of ancient theology.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, think about it in the context of a physical therapist or, a really good personal trainer.
Okay.
Let's say you go to the gym and for a whole month you've been working with a 10-pound weight. You master it. It doesn't hurt your arm anymore. Your trainer doesn't look at you and say, wow, you've mastered that. Let's make your workout better by giving you a 5-pound weight.
No, of course not. That would be completely counterproductive to the entire goal of being in the gym.
Exactly. They upgrade your routine by handing you a 20-pound weight. Now, the new routine is undeniably harder. Your muscles are going to burn.
You're going to sweat more.
You might even be really sore the next day. But that new, heavier weight is definitively better for your long-term cardiovascular health.
Right, your muscle density, your overall physical resilience.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant modern equivalent. The resistance itself is the point.
Yes.
The betterment is inextricably linked to the increased effort because the physiological, or in the text case, spiritual reward at the end is just so much greater.
Right.
And the source text explicitly notes this. It says a new divine ruling might be lighter on the people, or it might be significantly heavier. But either way, its goodness is defined solely by how beneficial it is for the society in the grand scheme of things at that specific moment in their history.
Okay, and I feel like this naturally leads us into a bit of a logical trap.
Oh, it definitely does.
And honestly, reading through the source material, you can see the ancient scholars saw this trap coming from a mile away.
They absolutely did.
Let's stick with the gym analogy for a second.
Right.
If the trainer gives you a 20-pound weight because it's better for your new level of fitness, it strongly implies that the 10-pound weight was somehow inferior.
Right. It was a lesser tool.
Yeah, it wasn't as good. So if a new divine verse comes down from the heavens to replace an old divine verse because the new one is better for the people,
I see where you're going.
doesn't that inherently imply that the actual words of the old verse were of a lower quality? Like, was the old verse flawed? Was God's first draft just not up to par?
And this brings us to the very next subtle point analyzed in our source text.
The third Latifa?
Yes. It asks this incredibly dangerous, highly volatile theological question. If one verse replaces another, because it is explicitly called better, does that mean one part of the divine text is aesthetically, linguistically, or miraculously superior to another part?
I mean, that feels like a trapdoor that could collapse their entire religious framework.
Oh, it's a massive problem.
If you admit even part of the divine text is less than perfect, the whole concept of divine infallibility just falls apart, right?
It is an absolute disaster for their theology if they allow that door to open even an inch. And so the scholars rush in to slam it shut and deadbolt it immediately.
Good move.
The source channels the writings of a major scholar named Abu Bakr al-Jassas, and he takes an incredibly hard, uncompromising line here.
What does he say?
He states that it is absolutely forbidden, from a theological standpoint, to say that one part of the Quran is better than another in terms of its recitation, its rhythm, its linguistic perfection, or its divine composition.
He's drawing a massive red line.
Emphatic.
He's basically saying, do not look at the poetry of the text or the sentence structure and try to rank it.
Exactly. According to the theological framework Al-Jassas is defending, every single syllable of the text is equally miraculous. Every single word stems from the exact same eternal, flawless divine source.
Okay, so it's all perfectly equal.
Right. Therefore, it is logically impossible for one divine utterance to be less perfect than another divine utterance in its inherent nature. Al-Jassas makes it abundantly clear. No Orthodox scholar has ever claimed that verse A is aesthetically or structurally better than verse B.
But wait, I'm genuinely confused now.
Okay, what's the hang-up?
The text explicitly uses the word better. We literally just spent 10 minutes establishing that the new ruling is better.
We did.
If the words themselves are all equally perfect, flawless, miraculous utterances, how on earth can one be functionally better than another? You can't have it both ways.
Well, the scholars argue that you absolutely can, but you have to completely separate the nature of the text from the utility of the text.
Nature versus utility.
Yeah.
Okay.
The underlying philosophy here, as the source explains, is that the superiority of the new verse lies purely in the utility of the ruling for the people at that very specific, highly localized moment in time.
So it's contextual.
Exactly. The betterment is about facilitation and appropriateness for the human condition in that exact era. It has absolutely nothing to do with the aesthetic, structural, or divine value of the words themselves.
Let me see if I can translate this into something tangible for our listeners, because I think I get it.
Go ahead.
Let's move away from the gym and think about like a master carpenter's toolkit.
Okay, toolkit.
Imagine a toolkit forged by the single greatest, most flawless blacksmith in human history. Every single tool in that box, every hammer, every saw, every wrench is made of completely flawless, unbreakable, perfectly balanced steel.
So it's a mathematically perfect set of tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now imagine you have a leaking, rusted pipe under your kitchen sink. Water is going everywhere. You reach into this perfect toolkit and you pull out a hammer.
Which is a flawless hammer.
Yes. That hammer is flawlessly made. It is a perfect object. But it is completely, entirely useless for your current situation. You can't fix a leaking pipe by smashing it with a perfect hammer.
No, you definitely shouldn't do that.
Right. So you reach back into the box and you pull out a wrench, you apply the wrench, you tighten the fitting, and the pipe is fixed.
Okay, so the wrench worked.
Yes. And in that exact moment, under that kitchen sink, the wrench is undeniably the better tool.
It is the only tool that actually provides the necessary benefit.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial part that I think Aljasis is getting at, the wrench isn't intrinsically more perfectly forged than the hammer.
Right.
The wrench isn't made of better steel. The blacksmith didn't try harder when he made the wrench. It hasn't suddenly become a superior object in the universe. It is simply the better tool for the specific job of fixing that exact pipe right now.
That captures Aljasis' entire argument beautifully.
Oh, awesome.
The source material is basically arguing that divine rulings are essentially tools designed to treat specific societal or spiritual ailments at specific times in human history.
That makes total sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So when the society evolves, when their problems change, or when they graduate to a new level of spiritual maturity, like a community going from handling 1 day of fasting to being ready for 30 days of fasting, the divine master reaches into the toolkit and pulls out a different tool.
And the new tool is better for the new situation.
Yes. But the old tool doesn't become trash. It remains a flawlessly crafted, perfect piece of the divine will, even if it is no longer being actively used to tighten the current pipe.
Wow. It's just a really elegant way to thread the needle.
It really is.
You completely protect the absolute untouchable perfection of the text while simultaneously allowing for the fluid, messy, changing nature of human reality. You don't have to pretend society doesn't change, and you don't have to pretend God makes mistakes.
It is a remarkable piece of theological engineering. But just when they get that paradox stabilized, the source material throws us another massive curveball.
Oh, here we go. What is it this time?
Well, if the text is perfect and the tools are flawless, what happens when the human vessel delivering that text drops the ball?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What happens when the prophet himself forgets a verse?
Okay, so this is moving from the abstract perfection of the text straight into the messy reality of human biology.
Exactly. And the source text doesn't shy away from this at all. It tackles a massive, seemingly irreconcilable contradiction right head on.
So what's the contradiction?
Well, the scholars are forced to confront a direct collision between two different statements in their own holy book. On one hand, there is a very famous part of the text that explicitly promises the prophet, "We will make you read, so you shall not forget."
You shall not forget.
Right. It is a sweeping divine guarantee of perfect, infallible memory regarding the revelation.
It's basically saying your brain is a steel trap. Nothing will leak out.
Exactly. But then, in the very verse we've been dissecting, the one about abrogation and bringing something better, it explicitly mentions God, causing a verse to be forgotten.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the exact Arabic phrasing is "ununsiha," which translates literally to, or "we cause it to be forgotten."
Oh, I can see why that would cause a total panic in a theological seminary.
Absolute panic.
I mean, if he is divinely guaranteed never to forget a single syllable, how can God simultaneously say, I'm going to cause you to forget things?
It's a complete logical impasse.
Yeah. And reading the source text, you can almost feel the anxiety of the early scholars trying to deal with this. Some of them actually tried to reject the literal translation of the word forgetting entirely, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
The text documents how some scholars were so uncomfortable with the idea of the prophet losing his memory that they tried to perform linguistic gymnastics.
Right.
They argued that the word nuncia shouldn't be translated as forgetting at all. They tried to claim it meant to delay, or to command the people to abandon, or to abrogate its legal ruling without losing the memory of the words.
They were desperate.
They were. They wanted any translation other than actual literal memory loss because they felt that any admission of forgetting violated that core guarantee of prophetic integrity.
They were trying to sanitize the history to protect the theology.
Yes, exactly.
But the source material pushes back against that instinct, right? It says, no, you can't just ignore the plain, obvious meaning of the words just because it makes you uncomfortable.
Correct.
So how do the primary scholars resolve this contradiction without just changing the definition of the words?
Well, the source brings in the synthesis of a brilliant Andalusian scholar named Ibn Atiyah. And Ibn Atiyah kind of saves the day by drawing an incredibly fine but logically sound theological line.
Okay, lay it on me.
He says, the problem isn't the word forgetting. The problem is that we're lumping two entirely different phenomena under one word. He says we have to distinguish between organic, human forgetting, and deliberate, divine erasure.
Walk me through that. What is the organic kind?
The organic kind is everyday, human fallibility. This is the kind of forgetting where you walk into a room and can't remember why you went in there.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Right. It's the forgetting caused by stress, by aging, by distraction, or by disease affecting the mind. It's a biological failure.
Okay.
Ibn Atiyah argues that the prophet is absolutely protected and completely immune from this kind of organic, flawed, human forgetting when it comes to the preservation of the revelation.
So that biological immunity is exactly what the guarantee "you shall not forget" covers.
Exactly.
Okay, so if his brain is perfectly protected from biological memory failure regarding the text, what is the second type of forgetting? How does the causing to be forgotten part actually work?
The second type is not a failure of the brain at all. It is a deliberate, highly orchestrated, divinely initiated erasure.
An erasure.
Yes, it is not an accident. It is an active mechanism of divine legislation. When God decides that the specific verse has served its purpose, like the hammer that is no longer needed, and he wants to completely remove it from the community's practice and their collective memory, he actively erases it from the prophet's heart and mind.
Wow.
It is a targeted act of divine will, not a human error. Ibn Atiyah states this is entirely permissible, both rationally and theologically, because the one who wrote the text have the absolute authority to delete it.
Wait, I need an analogy for this because the stakes here are massive.
They really are.
I mean, this is a largely illiterate society relying entirely on oral tradition. If the guy in charge forgets the words literally cease to exist.
Exactly.
So Ibn Atiyah is saying it's kind of the difference between a musician and a composer.
Oh, I like where this is going. Tell me more.
Okay, imagine a world-class concert pianist playing a hugely complex symphony. If the pianist is halfway through the performance and suddenly goes blank, forgets the next chord, and hits a bunch of wrong keys, that is a failure.
A huge failure.
Yeah, that's a biological, organic mistake. That is what the prophet is protected from. He will never just stumble and drop the sheet music.
Right.
But if the composer who wrote the symphony walks out onto the stage, taps the pianist on the shoulder, takes the sheet music, crosses out the third movement with a red pen, and writes a new melody on the spot.
Oh, I see it.
The pianist didn't forget the old movement in a flawed way. The composer actively erased it and replaced it. The original music is gone, but the integrity of the performer is completely intact.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The first scenario is a malfunction of the performer. The second is a feature of the creator's authority.
Yeah.
Ibn Atiyah is arguing that the prophet isn't losing the music. The composer is actively revising the score in real time.
And what I truly love about this source material is that it doesn't just leave this massive concept in the realm of high abstract philosophy.
No, it grounds it beautifully.
It brings in a specific, documented, historical anecdote to illustrate exactly how this dynamic played out in reality. And it is such a profoundly humanizing story.
It's one of the most revealing historical snapshots in the entire text. Set the scene for us.
Okay, so we are in the early days of the community in Medina. The prophet is standing at the front of the mosque, leading the entire congregation in the communal prayer.
Right.
Hundreds of people are standing behind him in complete silence, listening to his every single word. He is reciting a chapter of the Quran aloud. And right in the middle of the recitation, he accidentally skips a verse.
A literal public omission.
Yes, he just drops it and moves on to the next one, and nobody stops him.
Wow.
The prayer finishes. Afterward, he turns around to face the congregation. He specifically seeks out one of his closest companions, a man named Ubay ibn Ka'b. Right. Now, Ubay is crucial here because he wasn't just a regular guy. He was known as one of the absolute masters of the Quran. He had the whole thing memorized perfectly.
He's like a walking encyclopedia for them.
Exactly. And the prophet looks at Ubay and asks, "Were you not in the congregation? Why didn't you correct me when I missed the verse?"
And Ubay's response is the key to unlocking the entire psychology of that early community. Ubay replies, "I thought the verse had been lifted."
Which is just such a wild assumption to make.
It is. Think about the emotional weight of what Ubay is saying. He heard the prophet, the man guaranteed never to forget, skip a verse. And instead of thinking, oh, he made a human mistake, he slipped up, Ubay's immediate assumption was that the composer had just walked out onto the stage.
He assumed a brand new divine abrogation, a permanent erasure of divine law, had just occurred right there, live, in the middle of Tuesday afternoon prayer.
He assumed the sheet music was being rewritten in real time.
But then the prophet immediately corrects him. He doesn't play along. He says, "No, it wasn't lifted. I just forgot it."
I just forgot it. What's so deeply fascinating here and the source text goes out of its way to highlight this, is the incredible, almost startling transparency of this early community.
Yeah.
They did not feel the need to hide the human moments of their leader. They didn't convene a secret committee to cover up the fact that he skipped a verse and had to be reminded by a follower.
Right. Because in so many other historical traditions, that story would have been scrubbed from the record completely to protect the mythology of the perfect leader.
Exactly. But they preserved this exact story, recorded it meticulously, and passed it down for centuries
Ah.
because they used it to carefully define the boundaries between human nature and divine instruction. They weren't insecure about his humanity. They actively used his humanity to figure out how the mechanics of revelation actually worked.
Ah, I see. They needed to know the difference between a biological slip of the tongue and a divine software update. So if
Exactly.
he forgot something and then someone reminded him and he corrected it, that was human nature. The verse stays. But if he woke up one morning and a verse was entirely wiped from his memory and the divine confirmed it was gone, that was an act of abrogation.
It shows a community that is incredibly analytical about their own spiritual experiences. They aren't just blindly, passively accepting things. They are constantly categorizing, testing, and trying to understand the actual mechanisms of their faith.
And this dynamic, this intense, highly analytical, almost symbiotic relationship between the leader, the followers, and the text itself leads us perfectly into the next linguistic subtlety we have to explore.
The fourth Latifa.
Yes, because it isn't just about how the prophet remembered the text, it's about how the text actually spoke back to them. And that brings up a really strange grammatical shift.
It does. This subtle point focuses on a sudden, almost jarring grammatical shift in the specific verse we've been breaking down.
Okay.
After establishing the rules of abrogation, the verse ends with a heavy rhetorical question. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things?
Seems straightforward in English.
But the source text points out a very specific, deeply intentional nuance in the original Arabic phrase. Alam talam ana alaha ala kulli shayin qadir.
Right. The grammar there is incredibly specific, and it doesn't quite translate into standard English.
It doesn't at all. In English, you can be singular or plural. I can say you to one person or you to a room of 50 people.
Right.
But in Arabic, the verb talam, which means you know, is conjugated strictly in the singular. It is addressing one single solitary person directly. Historically and contextually, it is addressing the prophet himself. Do you, singular, not know?
Okay, so it's a direct address to one guy.
Yes. But, as the source text meticulously points out, the intended audience for this profound theological statement about ultimate divine power is absolutely not just the prophet. It is intended for his entire nation, the entire ummah, every believer until the end of time.
So the obvious question here is, why do this?
Exactly.
If the message is intended for 1 million people, why write the memo to just one guy? Why not conjugate it in the plural and say, do all of you not know?
Well, the source brings in the deeply philosophical commentary of the scholar Abu al-Sud to explain this choice. And it essentially comes down to a sophisticated philosophy of leadership, psychology, and rhetoric.
Okay, break that down for me.
By addressing the followers through the persona of the leader, the text achieves a powerful dual purpose. First, it affirms the prophet's status as the vanguard, the ultimate point of contact, the imam. But more importantly, it forces the followers to cognitively identify with him.
It leverages the social hierarchy to amplify the psychological impact.
Exactly. When the leader, the man they revere above all others, is addressed with such a heavy, majestic, almost intimidating rhetorical question, the followers feel the weight of it far more profoundly than if they were addressed as a faceless, generic crowd.
Let's bring this into a modern corporate environment, because I think the psychology translates perfectly.
Okay, I love your analogies. Let's hear it.
Imagine a CEO who wants to establish a rigorous new standard of excellence across a massive multinational company. The CEO could send out a generic, company-wide email that says, to all employees, do you not realize the standard of excellence we require?
Right. And most employees will skim that, assume it applies to someone else, and delete it. It diffuses responsibility completely.
Exactly. It's way too broad. But imagine the CEO sends out an open public letter CCing the entire company. But the letter is addressed solely to the highest performing, most respected regional manager in the firm.
Oh, wow.
Let's call him John. The letter says, John, do you not realize the absolute, uncompromising standard of excellence we require at this firm?
The psychological impact of that is entirely different.
It's explosive.
Yeah.
Because everyone reading that email thinks, good Lord, if the CEO is speaking to John, the best guy we have, with
Yeah.
that level of intensity and expectation, I better make absolutely sure my own work is completely flawless.
Right.
The message isn't just delivered, it is amplified 1,000 times because it is routed through the hierarchy. By addressing the top of the pyramid, the gravity of the message cascades down with maximum force.
That is a phenomenal modern equivalent. It perfectly illustrates Abu al-Saud's point. The text uses the singular regress to wake up the collective audience.
It's brilliant rhetoric.
But, as the source text points out, Abu al-Saud uncovers an even deeper, more subtle linguistic choice embedded in this exact same sentence.
Wait, there's more in that one sentence.
Oh yeah. Let's look at the phrase one more time. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things?
Okay, I've got the magnifying glass out. What's the hidden detail there?
Notice that the text uses the explicit noun, the proper name, Allah. It does not use a pronoun.
Right.
It doesn't say, do you not know that he has power over all things? Even though, grammatically speaking, a pronoun would make perfect sense. It would flow very naturally, and in fact, the preceding sentences in the broader context use pronouns.
So the author of the text actively chose to break the grammatical flow to drop the full proper name into the sentence.
Yes, and Abu al-Saud explains that replacing a pronoun with the explicit majestic noun is a deeply intentional rhetorical device. It is not an accident of poetry.
What does it do?
It is designed to accomplish something highly specific in the psychology of the listener. It is meant to instill a sudden, overwhelming sense of awe, majesty, and absolute sovereignty in their hearts.
So using a pronoun like he is just too casual. It allows the listener's mind to kind of glide over the concept without feeling the weight of it.
Precisely. A pronoun is, by definition, a linguistic placeholder. It's inherently passive. It refers back to something already established so your brain doesn't have to work as hard.
Right, you're on autopilot.
But dropping the actual heavy ultimate name of the divine right into the middle of a rhetorical question forces the listener to stop. It forces them to recalibrate. It makes them remember exactly who they are dealing with.
It's a linguistic shock to the system.
Abu al-Saud notes that this phrasing explicitly ties the concept of overarching power to the ultimate source of existence. It leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity or casualness.
It's the difference between a manager saying, the boss is watching, and saying, the chief executive officer, founder, and majority shareholder is watching. The nouns carry a gravity that the pronouns simply don't possess. And this sense of awe, this demand that the listener understand exactly who possesses this absolute sovereignty, requires the listener to understand exactly who they are relying on in their daily lives.
Right.
Like, why do they need this all-powerful being?
Which brings us to what is, without a doubt, my absolute favorite piece of analysis in the entire source document.
Oh, the fifth Latifa.
Yes. This is an incredibly precise, almost heartbreakingly subtle linguistic distinction that maps out the entire human experience of vulnerability.
And I have to agree, this part absolutely blew me away when I read it. Set this up for us.
Okay. It examines the concluding phrase of this profound verse. The sentence ends with a stark declaration. Without Allah, you have no wali and no nasir.
Wali and Nasir. Now, in standard English translations of the Quran, these two words are usually translated as protector and helper.
Right.
So the sentence reads, you have no protector and no helper. And I have to be honest, my immediate reaction when I read this in English was, aren't those just synonyms?
They definitely sound like it.
Right. Aren't protector and helper basically the same thing? It feels like the text is just repeating itself for emphasis, like a lawyer saying cease and desist or null and void. It just feels redundant.
In translation, it does feel completely redundant. But in the original Arabic, as the source text meticulously breaks down, these two words are not synonyms at all.
Not even close, right?
Not at all. They represent completely different, fundamentally opposed hemispheres of the human experience of vulnerability and support.
Okay, break it down.
But first, the source text points out a crucial grammatical similarity before it highlights the difference.
Yeah.
Both the word wali and the word nasir are formulated in what Arabic linguists call the fa'il form.
The fa'il form. Okay, let's slow down here. What does that morphology mean for the listener who doesn't speak a word of Arabic? Like, why does the shape of the word matter?
Well, in Arabic morphology, the root of a word gives you the basic meaning. But you can put that root into different templates, different shapes, to change its intensity or duration. The fa'il template is very specific. It is used to denote extreme intensity, exaggeration, permanence, or an inherent characteristic.
So it's the maximum version of the word.
Exactly. So we're not talking about casual support. A nayseer isn't just someone who helps you once to move a couch. It is someone whose very nature, whose enduring characteristic, is to provide overwhelming, continuous, undeniable help.
And a wali isn't just an acquaintance or a friendly neighbor.
Right. A wali isn't someone you just get along with. It is someone with whom you have an intense, enduring, practically unbreakable bond. The text deliberately chooses the most extreme, exaggerated, permanent forms of these concepts. It is raising the stakes to the absolute maximum.
Okay, so they're both extreme, ultimate versions of support. But how are they different from each other? What is the actual distinction the scholars are making?
The source provides a brilliant, deeply emotional breakdown of the distinction. Let's start with the first word, wali. A wali, which translates roughly to protector, guardian, or patron, fundamentally implies a deep, intimate, personal connection. It is someone who is incredibly close to you.
Like family.
Think of a mother, a father, a best friend, a deeply devoted spouse. They love you. They are emotionally invested in your survival. They know your fears. They know your dreams.
Okay, having an ultimate wali sounds incredibly comforting. What's the catch? Why do we need another word?
The catch, the tragic reality that the text exposes is that while a wali has all the emotional intimacy and the desperate desire to save you, they might actually be completely powerless to do it in a real crisis.
Oh, wow.
Think about it this way.
Oh.
Imagine you were swept away in a raging, violent river. You were drowning. Standing on the riverbank is your elderly mother.
Okay.
She's your ultimate wali. She loves you more than anything in the world. She is intimately connected to your soul, but she does not have the physical strength, the swimming ability, or the resources to jump into that raging water and pull you out.
Because the river is too strong.
Exactly. Her love is infinite, but her power is strictly limited. She will literally watch you drown while weeping for you.
That is deeply tragic. The tragedy of the wali is infinite intimacy combined with potential powerlessness.
Beautifully said.
So, what is the nayseer?
The nayseer, which is usually translated as helper or supporter, is the exact polar opposite of the wali.
The opposite.
Yes. A nayseer is an entity that possesses undeniable power, ultimate resources, and the absolute, unshakable capability to save you from any threat whatsoever.
So if you're drowning in that same raging river...
The nayseer is the Coast Guard.
Yes, the nayseer is the heavily armored Coast Guard helicopter flying overhead with a rescue basket, a mechanical winch, and a team of highly trained divers.
They have absolute power over the situation. They can conquer the river.
But they don't know me.
Exactly. Here is the tragedy of the nayseer. They might be a total, complete stranger. They have absolutely no emotional connection to you whatsoever. You are just a coordinate on a map to them. You are a job. They will pull you out of the water. They will save your life, but they do not love you. They don't know your name. They don't know your childhood. And as soon as they drop you at the hospital, they will fly away and literally forget you exist.
Wow.
They are infinitely powerful, but they're completely emotionally distant.
This is absolutely blowing my mind. Because the source text isn't just analyzing ancient vocabulary, it's analyzing how human beings navigate the modern world looking for safety.
Right. It's universal.
We are all constantly, desperately searching for either a wali or a nasir. Think about modern life. We have friends and family who love us deeply, our walis, but when we get hit with a catastrophic medical bill or we lose our job, their love cannot bail us out of the financial crisis.
They can hold your hand, but they can't fix the problem.
Exactly. And conversely, we look to massive institutions, governments, politicians, mega corporations, insurance companies, to be our nasir. They possess the trillions of dollars and the structural power to solve our problems with the snap of their fingers. But they couldn't care less if we exist. We are just a social security number.
We are constantly caught between love without power and power without love.
Yes. We want our politicians to be walis, to care about us personally, but they are only nasirs. And we want our friends to be nasirs, to have the power to save us, but they are only walis.
Is the human condition.
So, bringing this back to the source text, what is the profound theological claim these scholars are making by putting these two specific words side by side?
The profound claim is that by stating, without the divine, you have no wali and no nasir, the text is arguing that only the divine encompasses both absolute necessities simultaneously.
Both at once.
Yes. The text claims the divine is the ultimate, wali, intimately close, personally invested in the architecture of your specific soul, closer to you than your own jugular vein. to use another famous phrase from their tradition.
The ultimate intimacy.
Yes, but simultaneously, without contradiction, the divine is the ultimate nature-possessing, infinite, unbreakable cosmic power to intervene, to change the fabric of reality, to save you from the raging river when no human could.
Wow.
The text is looking the listener in the eye and saying, human beings and human institutions will always, inevitably, offer you a fractured, incomplete version of support. They will give you love without power, or power without love. Only here, in this specific divine relationship, will you find the perfect, unbroken synthesis of both.
I have to say, that is just, it's a breathtaking piece of linguistic analysis.
Isn't it?
It takes what looks like a simple, redundant, repetitive sentence in an English translation and reveals it to be a complete high-definition psychological map of human vulnerability and divine reassurance.
It's honestly beautiful, regardless of your religious beliefs. It's just a stunning piece of writing.
It truly is. It perfectly illustrates why these scholars spent their entire lives obsessing over single words. But understanding that perfect, ultimate support system, that perfect synthesis of the Wali and the Nasir, makes the final subtle point from our source text all the more tragic.
Right, because there is always a flip side.
Because the final point explores what happens when a human being has absolute access to that perfect support and still somehow manages to walk away from it.
Exactly. This brings us to the final part of our journey today, the sixth latifa analyzed in the source material.
It's what I'd call the anatomy of straying.
That's a good way to put it. The deep dive concludes its microscopic textual analysis by looking at a specific phrase used to describe those who reject this divine system.
The phrase is sawa sabil, right?
Yes, which is almost universally translated in English as those who strayed from the right path.
Right. And again, just like with Wali and Nasir, the English translation strayed from the right path feels a bit generic.
It softens the blow.
It really does. It sounds almost accidental. It sounds like you were driving in a new, confusing city at night and you missed a turn, or you were hiking in a dense forest and you took the wrong fork in the trail because the signs were bad.
Right. It implies a kind of innocent mistake, an error of navigation due to bad data.
But the source text pulls out the magnifying glass one last time and points out that the literal etymological translation of the Arabic word sawa completely changes that imagery.
It removes the innocence.
It does. The source meticulously notes that sawa does not simply mean right or correct in a moral sense. Literally translated in its physical geometric sense, it means the middle or the exact center of something.
It implies a state of perfect balance, equivalence, and inescapable obviousness.
So the phrase they're analyzing isn't just straying from the right path, it's straying from the exact center of the path.
Exactly. And the source describes this specific phrasing as the ultimate, most severe, most tragic rebuke possible in the text.
Really? The most severe?
Yeah. Yes. And to understand why the scholars viewed it as such a heavy rebuke, we have to look at the physical imagery it creates in the mind of the original 7th century audience.
Let's explore that geometry because it changes the whole psychological weight of the verse.
Go for it.
If you stray from the middle of the path, it means you didn't just get lost in a confusing, overgrown jungle where all the trails look the same and the sun is blocked out.
Right.
It means you were placed on a wide, clear, perfectly leveled, unmistakably obvious highway. You were placed in the dead center of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were given the flawless tools. You were given the perfect synthesis of the Wali and the Nasir. You were addressed directly by the profound rhetoric of the divine. You had everything. The road could not possibly be clearer.
And despite all of that absolute clarity, despite being in the exact safe center of a wide-open road in broad daylight, you somehow managed to wander all the way over to the shoulder, ignore the rumble strips, and stumble off into the ditches.
That is the immense psychological weight of the word dala, which means to err or to go astray, when it is deliberately combined with the concept of the middle path, or sawa al-sabil.
Because it implies that the failure, the straying, wasn't due to a lack of clarity in the divine instructions.
Exactly. It wasn't because the map was confusing, or the theology was too dense, or the terrain was too difficult to navigate.
It was an active, willful turning away from something incredibly obvious. It's a willful ignorance.
Yeah.
If you drive your car off the side of a 10-lane highway on a perfectly sunny day with no traffic, it's not because the road was hard to find, it's because you actively closed your eyes and intentionally cranked the steering wheel to the right.
That's it, exactly.
The text is using this precise geometric language, the idea of the center, to lay the blame for spiritual failure squarely on human obstinance, not on divine obscurity.
It is the ultimate tragic ending to the sequence we've just studied.
Yeah.
Think about the arc the scholars have taken us on today.
It's been a massive journey.
It really has. The divine provides a legislative system that is genuinely better for your ultimate benefit, even if it requires the temporary friction of something like fasting.
Right, the heavy weight at the gym.
Yes, it perfectly preserves the flawless tools necessary for your specific time in history. It accommodates the human memory of the prophet while fiercely guarding the integrity of the revelation.
The pianist and the composer.
Exactly. It addresses you with profound rhetorical majesty, using proper nouns to wake you up. It offers you the perfect, unparalleled synthesis of intimate love and ultimate power.
The Wali and the Nasir.
Yes. And yet, knowing human nature, the text acknowledges that some people will still find a way to actively wander off the dead center of that reality and into the ditch.
It's a deeply sobering thought. It places the responsibility entirely on the individual.
It really does.
And, well, that brings us to the end of our journey through this specific slice of text.
What a slice it was.
Seriously. Let's take a step back and look at what we've actually accomplished here today. We took a dense, intimidating, incredibly old theological document. We didn't even read the whole thing.
Not even close.
We looked at just 16% of it. A tiny, highly technical slice focused entirely on the laitaif, the subtle linguistic and grammatical points.
And by slowing down, by refusing to just skim for the gist, we uncovered an entire universe of meaning.
We really did. We explored profound philosophical debates about the true nature of betterment, learning that true benefit often outweighs immediate ease.
We explored the complex psychology of memory and how an early community transparently embraced their leaders' human fallibility to understand divine mechanics.
We analyzed the brilliant rhetorical strategy of addressing the followers through the persona of the leader, and the psychological shock of using a proper noun instead of a passive pronoun.
And perhaps most memorably, we learned that there is a heartbreaking, profound difference between someone who loves you but can't help you and someone who can help you but doesn't love you, the tragedy of the Wali and the Nasir.
For anyone listening to this, I truly hope this has served as a masterclass in active critical reading.
I completely agree. What these ancient scholars demonstrated in this small slice of text is a skill that is desperately, urgently needed today.
Because it proves that whether you are reading ancient theology, a modern legal contract, a highly crafted political speech, or just a complicated, emotionally charged email from a friend, slowing down to ask why a specific word was used.
Why this exact tense? Why this specific noun instead of a pronoun?
Yes, it can unlock entirely new dimensions of reality. It fundamentally changes how you interact with the information of the world.
It really does. It trains you not to just blindly accept the summary. Don't just take the translation at face value. Pull out the magnifying glass. Look at the ink.
Because the words we choose and the words deliberately chosen for us by others build the exact reality we live in.
Very true.
Which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
I love these. Let's hear it.
We just spent an hour seeing how a single word choice like helper versus protector, Wali versus Nasir, carries drastically different psychological weight. It creates a completely different emotional universe.
Yeah.
So think about your own life today. Think about the conversations you're going to have with your partner, your kids, or your boss. How many everyday words do you use completely interchangeably without realizing you might be losing crucial layers of meaning? Mm-hmm. Are you telling someone you need them when you actually just want them? Are you calling someone a friend when they are really just a useful acquaintance?
Right.
When you use words without looking at them through that magnifying glass, are you unintentionally changing the entire emotional impact of your own life? If these ancient scholars believed a single syllable could change the universe, maybe we should pay a little more attention to the syllables we're putting out into our own.
Imagine for a second that someone hands you a blueprint for your entire life.
Okay.
Right. Like an instruction manual. And you are told, in no uncertain terms, that it was authored by the universe itself.
Wow. No pressure?
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. It's completely flawless. So, you start building your life around it. You completely reorient your daily habits, your community, your very understanding of right and wrong.
Right. You commit to it fully.
You do. And you even endure mockery and hardship to stick to this blueprint. But then, I don't know, a few months later, the author of that blueprint comes back, points to a massive foundational pillar you've just built and says, actually, we're tearing that down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Here's a new rule. Do this instead.
I mean, that would be psychologically devastating.
Completely.
Or at the very least, incredibly disorienting.
Yeah.
You know, you would immediately start questioning the architect.
Exactly. You'd think, wait, if the first rule was perfect, why are we changing it? Did you make a mistake? Did you, like, not see the future? Or worse, is this entire blueprint just something you're making up as you go along?
Yeah, that cognitive dissonance is real.
It is. And that shock to the system, that is the very heartbeat of what we are unpacking today. We are taking a deep dive into an absolutely fascinating analytical text. It's titled The Concept of Abrogation and Prophetic Integrity in Islam.
And this isn't just an abstract theological puzzle for scholars to debate in a library.
Yeah.
This was a real visceral crisis in the 7th century.
Yeah.
The technical term we are dealing with here is Naskh, which translates broadly to abrogation.
Abrogation, right.
Yeah. It is the concept that a divine law revealed to the Prophet of Islam could actually be updated, replaced, or entirely removed over time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually, you know, when we do these deep dives, we try to give you, the listener, a bird's eye view of an entire book.
Right. We synthesize the whole thing.
Right. Exactly. But the source material we have today is so dense and, like, so intricately argued that taking a bird's eye view would actually be doing it a massive disservice.
Oh, absolutely. You lose all the nuance.
You really would.
Yeah.
So we are doing something highly unusual today. We are going straight into the laboratory.
I love that.
Yeah, we are taking a very specific, concentrated slice of this text. Basically, the second 16.67% of the excerpts we were provided.
Very precise.
Hey, we have to be. It's a tight cross-section that deals with the exact linguistic mechanics and the human drama of how these laws changed, and we are going to put it under a microscope.
Which is, frankly, the only way to tackle historical theology of this caliber.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot just glide over the English translations and assume you understand the architecture of the argument.
Because things get lost in translation.
Completely. The entire justification for why divine laws change is buried in the microscopic roots of classical Arabic words. Yeah, it's in the subtle shifts in grammar and the intensely complex psychology of the people who are witnessing these changes in real time.
So it's all connected.
Right. We have to look at the linguistics, the sociology, and the theology all at once.
Well, the text starts us off right in the absolute deep end of those linguistics. It forces us to look at a single Arabic word.
Just one word.
One word. Nunsiha. Now, when you read the standard English translation of the Quranic verse dealing with abrogation, this word is almost always translated as cause to forget.
Right, as in God gives a verse and then God causes it to be forgotten.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the source material blows the doors off that simple translation.
Oh, it really does.
The scholarly debate over what that single word actually implies, I mean, it functionally changes the entire concept of memory and divine law.
What's fascinating here is the sheer elasticity of classical Arabic.
Okay, how so?
Well, in English, forgetting is almost exclusively a passive cognitive failure.
Right, like you misplaced your keys.
Yeah, or you forgot a name. It's an error in the mental hard drive.
The glitch.
Exactly. But in classical Arabic, a single root word can encompass a physical action, a deliberate cognitive state, and a social dynamic simultaneously.
That is wild.
It is. The text lays out three incredibly distinct historical interpretations from classical scholars on how to actually understand this word, nunsia.
And the first one actually leans into that literal cognitive definition, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
The text cites an early scholar named Qatada, and he takes a surprisingly straightforward approach. He argues that nunsiha means literal, absolute forgetfulness.
Right.
The concept here is that a divine command was given, people acted on it, and then, by a direct act of divine intervention, the very memory of the verse was erased.
From the mind of the prophet and the hearts of the believers.
Yes, just entirely wiped.
It is a heavy, almost overwhelming concept when you really think about it.
It's huge.
Qatada is arguing for a complete cognitive removal. The divine will that placed the information in the human mind is the exact same divine will that actively extracts it.
Leaving no trace whatsoever.
Right. It's not that the believers just casually misplaced the memory over time, like we forget what we had for breakfast.
No.
It was a targeted, purposeful erasure of the text from the human consciousness.
Which raises so many questions about human agency and memory. Just poof.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
But what I love about this source text is that it immediately pivots to show how diverse the early scholarship was.
Oh, the debate was fierce.
It brings in a second view from Ibn Abbas, who is, I mean, he's this monumental figure in early Islamic scholarship.
Absolutely legendary.
And Ibn Abbas completely rejects the memory wipe theory.
He does.
He takes it in a totally different, much more pragmatic direction.
He roots the word not in the cognitive act of forgetting, but in the physical and deliberate act of abandonment, or leaving.
Leaving it behind.
Exactly. The text provides crucial context here. In ancient Arabic, the root word for forgetting is frequently used as a metaphor for deliberately abandoning something.
Oh.
Yeah, and the text illustrates this by quoting another verse describing people who ignored divine guidance. The verse goes, "They forgot God, so he forgot them."
Which is the perfect proof of concept, because obviously an omniscient, all-knowing God cannot suffer a literal memory lapse.
Right.
He didn't just, like, misplace a group of humans in his mind.
Precisely. In that context, the phrase clearly means they deliberately abandoned his commands.
Right.
And in response, he abandoned them to the consequences of their actions. There is no cognitive failure there.
It's a mutual withdrawal.
Yes. So, applying that linguistic framework to our word, minsiha, Ibn Abbas argues that it means we leave the verse and do not change or abrogate it.
So it is an active legislative decision to leave something behind.
Exactly. It is not a passive loss of memory.
I am trying to map this onto how we manage information today.
Yeah.
Because, the leap from memory loss to deliberate abandonment is huge.
It's a massive shift.
Okay, think about how we store data on a computer. Kadada's view, the literal forgetting, is like doing a hard delete on a file. You drag it to the trash, you empty the trash, you overwrite the sector on the hard drive.
Right. It is completely gone. Unrecoverable.
Erased from existence.
Yeah.
But Ibn Abbas's view feels much more like moving a file to a deeply buried archive folder.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right, the file is still there on the hard drive. You know it exists. The system registers its presence.
Yeah.
But you've removed its executable function.
It's no longer actively running on your desktop.
Exactly.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Kadada is arguing for the hard delete. The data is wiped. But Ibn Abbas is talking about archiving.
Archiving the law.
Right. The law, or the verse, remains in the historical record. It might even remain in the recited text of the scripture that people memorize and chant in prayers.
But you don't act on it.
Exactly. Its executable function, the actual legal ruling that tells you what to do on a Tuesday morning, that has been turned off. It has been set aside.
And then the text offers a third view from Al-Azhari, which seems to take that archiving concept and add an authoritative layer to it.
Yes, Al-Azhari focuses heavily on the command aspect of the language.
Okay.
He argues that the word means commanding something to be left or abandoned.
So it's not a natural drift.
No, it's not just that the community naturally drifted away from a practice, it's that a deliberate, authoritative directive was given to drop it.
Wow.
The source text beautifully highlights this by pulling from the dictionary of the early Arabs, which is their poetry.
I love when they do that.
It's so helpful. It cites a classic poetic line, "I have a duty I will not forget nor neglect."
Okay, so in the context of the poem, to forget the duty isn't about failing to remember it.
Right.
It's about actively neglecting or dropping the execution of that duty.
Exactly.
So if I'm tracking this right, we have literal erasure, deliberate archiving, and an authoritative command to drop a duty.
That's right.
That is already a massive spectrum of meaning for just one word.
And we aren't even done.
No, we aren't. Because just when I felt like I had a solid grip on the debate, the text throws in a total curveball.
It introduces the variant phonetic reading.
Yes. It introduces an alternative recitation of the word itself. Nansa'aha.
Ah, yes, with the Hamza.
Right. It adds a hamza, a glottal stop, Nansa'aha. And suddenly, we aren't even talking about forgetting or abandoning anymore.
No, we are in a completely different semantic universe now.
It's wild.
If the word is recited as nansa'aha, the root changes entirely. It no longer has anything to do with memory or neglect.
What does it mean?
It comes from the root of delaying.
Delaying, okay.
Yeah, and the text explains this by showing how the root was used in the everyday life of the 7th century. It shares a linguistic foundation with the word nasia, which was the common commercial term for selling something on credit or delaying the payment of a debt to a later date.
Oh, so it's a socioeconomic metaphor.
Yes.
It translates to we delay it.
Exactly. It means to postpone the revelation of a specific verse until the community is ready for it, or to delay the implementation of a rule until a later, more appropriate time.
But look at what this does to the text. We now have these wildly divergent concepts swirling around this single moment in the scripture.
It's a lot to hold at once.
We have the hard delete of memory, the deliberate archiving of a rule, and the temporal delay of a revelation.
Right.
From a modern analytical perspective, it feels like the text is fracturing. It feels like these early scholars are pulling the text in three totally incompatible directions. I mean, how can it mean all of these things at once?
It definitely looks like a fracture on the surface. I completely agree. But this is where the genius of classical Islamic synthesis comes into play.
Okay, save me here.
The source material brings in a later scholar, Al-Alusi, and he looks at all these divergent readings, the erasing, the abandoning, the delay, and he steps back to look at the macro picture. Al-Alusi essentially argues you are all arguing over the mechanics, but you are describing the exact same functional reality.
Wait, how does that work? How is erasing a memory the same reality as delaying a timeline?
You have to look at it from the perspective of the human being experiencing the law.
Okay.
Al-Alusi argues that whether a verse is delayed in the divine master plan and simply hasn't been sent down yet, or whether a verse has been completely erased from the human mind.
Yeah.
The ultimate practical result for the human community standing there in the desert is identical. They are not currently acting on that specific instruction.
Oh, that is brilliant.
It's profoundly pragmatic.
It really is.
He writes that whether a concept is temporally delayed or whether it is distanced from the mind so its meaning isn't remembered, the two readings unite in their practical effect.
The human experience of divine legislation is that the rule is inactive.
Exactly. The execution has paused.
So what does this actually mean for someone trying to understand historical texts today? It means when you pick up a translation of an ancient scripture and you read a flat phrase like cause to forget.
You are looking at the tip of a massive semantic iceberg.
Huge. Under the surface is this incredibly rich, highly sophisticated debate about the nature of memory, the mechanics of archiving law, and the temporal reality of human existence.
And, this extensive linguistic debate isn't just trivia.
No.
It's the required groundwork for the next massive philosophical hurdle the text has to clear.
Because nature abhors a vacuum?
Exactly. If a rule is archived or erased or delayed, a void is created. And society abhors a legislative vacuum. Something else has to take its place.
And the text explicitly addresses that replacement. It says that whatever replaces the old rule will be, quote, better.
Right.
Which brings us to the next massive theme in our deep dive today, the philosophy of what better actually means when you are dealing with divine perfection.
This is where we cross from linguistics into heavy theology.
Fasten your seatbelts.
The phrase analyzed in the text is bihayden minka, which translates literally to bring something better than it.
Now, the source material immediately attempts to define better. It says better in this context means easier, lighter, or more beneficial for the people, either in the short term or the long term.
Yes. And to explain this, the text relies heavily on al-Qurtubi,
A major figure.
an absolute titan of classical Quranic commentary. Al-Qurtubi recognizes instantly that there is a massive philosophical trap hidden in the word better.
Which is exactly where my mind went the second I read it.
Oh, for sure.
I have to push back on this concept because, to a modern reader, it feels like a glaring contradiction.
It does.
If the original rule came from a supposedly perfect, infallible God, how can a new rule possibly be better?
Right.
Doesn't the very existence of a better rule logically demand that the first rule was flawed or suboptimal?
That's the trap.
Yeah. How can a perfect divinity issue a suboptimal command? It feels like the ultimate gotcha question.
And you are not alone in thinking that. That was the exact highly weaponized critique leveled by the skeptics and critics in 7th century Arabia.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, they threw that exact paradox right in the prophet's face.
So they saw the trap too.
They absolutely did. And it is the exact question al-Qurtubi is answering here. If we connect this to the broader theological framework, al-Qurtubi clarifies that better absolutely does not mean that one piece of God's word is inherently superior in its divine nature to another piece.
Okay.
He states it beautifully and categorically. God's speech does not excel itself. All of it is equally divine. The perfection of the author is constant.
Okay, well, if the author's perfection is constant and the origin is equally divine, where does the better come into play?
The perfection isn't located in the static nature of the rule itself. The perfection is found in the application of the rule.
The application?
Yes. To a highly specific group of humans at a highly specific point in time. Al-Qurtubi argues that the ruling, the practical lived implication of the command, is what becomes more beneficial.
So the medicine changes because the patient's condition has changed.
Exactly. And he provides 3 distinct categories for how a new ruling can be classified as better.
All right, let's explore these categories. I'm going to guess the first one is the most obvious. It's just easier to do.
You got it. The first category of better is that the new rule is physically or psychologically lighter.
Give me an example.
Imagine a community that was previously commanded to observe a massive, deeply restrictive fasting requirement, or an incredibly heavy financial tax for charity.
Okay.
If a new rule comes down that reduces the days of fasting or lowers the tax rate, that new rule is tangibly, obviously better for the human in the immediate short-term reality.
Because it relieves a burden.
Exactly.
Which makes total sense. A lighter load is better. So what is the second category?
The second category is the exact opposite.
Well,
The new rule can actually be heavier or harder
wait, how can a harder, more difficult rule be considered better by the people who have to follow it?
because of the ultimate spiritual economy.
The spiritual economy.
Yeah.
Okay.
In this worldview, a harder rule, for example, instituting a new mandatory daily prayer or increasing the requirement to defend the community, that carries a much greater exponential spiritual reward.
Oh.
It requires more effort, yes, but the payout in the afterlife is vastly superior. So from a theological perspective, it is better for the ultimate eternal destination of the soul.
Even if it demands more sweat and tears from the body today.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So better is entirely subjective to the desired outcome.
Yes.
You have an immediate physical relief on one hand
Uh-huh.
and an ultimate spiritual investment on the other. Both are better, they're just measured on completely different timelines.
That's a great way to summarize it. And the third category Al-Qurtubi offers is a rule that is perfectly equal in difficulty to the old rule,
Equal, then why change it?
because it shifts the focus to something more appropriate for the current societal circumstance.
Oh, context.
Exactly. Let's say a rule about how to divide property during peacetime is replaced by a rule about how to handle property during an active siege. The new rule isn't necessarily harder or easier, but it is better because it is the exact tool required for the crisis at hand.
I love this. It completely shatters the idea that a rule has to be permanently static to be perfect.
It does.
Think about wearing a heavy winter coat.
Okay.
In January, a winter coat is the perfect piece of clothing. It saves your life.
Definitely.
But if you wear that exact same winter coat in July, it becomes a burden. It might even harm you.
If you heat stroke, yeah.
Right. It's not that the coat was flawed in January. It's that the coat was perfectly designed for January, and a T-shirt is perfectly designed for July.
Yeah.
If you tried to enforce the January rule in July, that would be the flaw.
That analogy captures the exact pragmatic adaptive philosophy the text is conveying. The divine law is adapting to the seasonal shifts of human society.
It's beautiful.
It is, but, and the text is very self-aware of this, philosophical explanations only go so far.
Because humans are messy.
Because human beings are intensely emotional creatures, and change is terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. Even if you explain the winter coat philosophy beautifully, if someone has spent their whole life believing that taking off the coat is a crime, telling them to put on a T-shirt is going to cause a panic attack.
Change is incredibly disorienting. When the foundational rules of your community, the rituals you perform every single day, the very boundaries of what is sacred and profane start shifting beneath your feet.
Humans feel unmoored.
They feel intense anxiety. They start looking around and wondering, who is actually steering this ship? Have we lost control?
And what blew my mind reading this source material is how it addresses that specific anxiety immediately.
Right in the text.
Not in the next chapter, but right in the very same sentence. It executes this massive linguistic pivot.
It's quite sudden.
It transitions straight from the mechanics of changing laws into a profound statement of divine presence. It says, without God, you have no protector or helper.
And true to form, the source text doesn't let us just read past the English words protector and helper.
Nope, back to the Arabic we go.
It stops us, grabs us by the collar, and forces us to look at the precise, granular Arabic words used to convey this reassurance.
Wali and Nasir.
Yes, Wali and Nasir.
Let's unpack these two words because the text makes a very sharp, almost legally precise distinction between them. They aren't just synonyms for friend.
Far from it. A Wali is not a vague, passive well-wisher. The text defines a wali as a close ally, a guardian, or a patron who actively manages your affairs.
Actively manages.
Yes. To give historical context, the text points out that the term wali al-ad was the formal title used for the manager of Muslim affairs, essentially the crown prince or the ruling regent.
Oh, wow.
A wali possesses authority. A wali steps into your life, takes active control of the situation, and makes executive decisions on your behalf to ensure your survival.
So the wali is in the driver's seat. They have their hands firmly on the steering wheel.
Yes. A nasir, on the other hand, operates in a different capacity.
How so?
A nasir is someone who assists, aids, or supports you in an endeavor you are already undertaking. If you are trying to move a massively heavy couch up a flight of stairs, a nasir is the friend who grabs the other end and lifts with you.
But the wali?
The wali is the one who hired the moving company, mapped out the logistical route, paid the insurance, and told you to sit back while it gets handled.
That distinction is incredible. You need both, but they play entirely different roles.
Exactly.
But the text doesn't stop at the vocabulary. It points out something highly specific about the underlying grammar of both these words.
Drawing on the insights of another legendary scholar, Fakhr al-Razi.
This is where the linguistic mastery of the text really shines. Fakhr al-Razi notes that both wali and nasir in this specific verse are constructed using a very particular Arabic morphological pattern.
A fa'il form.
Okay, grammar alert for everyone listening. I need to know why the fa'il form matters. What does it actually do to a word?
In classical Arabic morphology, you take a three-letter root concept and you fit it into different rhythmic patterns to change its meaning.
Right.
When you force a root into the fa'il pattern, it acts as an amplifier.
An amplifier.
It indicates extreme exaggeration, overwhelming intensity, or deep permanence. It takes a standard noun or adjective and turns the volume dial all the way up to 11.
So it's not just saying God is a manager. It's saying God is a hyper-manager.
Yes.
An intensely active, relentlessly engaged ultimate manager.
Yeah.
And not just a helper, but an overwhelmingly powerful permanent assister.
Exactly. Now, connect the dots back to the psychological terror of changing laws.
Okay.
Why does the text use this intensely exaggerated, amplified grammar right after dropping the bombshell that eternal laws can be abrogated, archived, or delayed?
Oh man, I see it. It is the ultimate grounding mechanism.
It really is.
When the ground underneath you, the very legal structure of your reality is shifting, you don't need a vague friend. You need an anchor.
Yes.
The text is using this intense grammatical form to grab the believer and say, do not panic about the changing rules.
Yeah.
The hyper-manager is still fundamentally in total control.
It is entirely designed to soothe the psychological whiplash of legislative transition. It's a profound reassurance. It's telling the community that the changing of the law is actually proof of the manager's hyperactive involvement in your specific daily reality, not proof of his absence or indecision.
The psychological layering in just those few words is staggering.
It is.
It addresses the intellect with the philosophy of better, and it addresses the emotional panic with the grammar of extreme protection.
It covers all the bases.
But what I find so fascinating about the flow of this text is that it doesn't stay in this comforting, soothing mode for long.
Not at all.
It actually takes a remarkably sharp turn in tone right after this, which moves us into a completely different emotional landscape.
Yes, the tone shifts from profound reassurance to a very direct, almost confrontational challenge.
The text moves to analyze the phrase that immediately follows the reassurance. In English, it starts with a simple word, or.
Just or?
The phrase is, or do you want to ask your messenger? And once again, the source text acts like a speed bump. It says, stop, look at the specific word being used for or.
The Arabic word here is am.
Am. And in the intricate rules of classical Arabic grammar, there are two entirely distinct types of the word am.
Yes, you have the connected am al-muttasila, and the disconnected am al-munkatiya.
Okay, let's break that down for someone who doesn't speak classical Arabic. What is a connected am?
A connected am is the way we normally use the word or in a standard sentence.
Okay.
It is used to offer a genuine, balanced choice in a question. It usually follows an interrogative word. For example, is this animal a camel or is it a sheep?
Right.
You are logically connecting two possible realities and asking a genuine question to determine the truth.
But the text leaning again on Al-Qurtubi's analysis, points out that in this specific highly charged verse, the am being used is the disconnected am.
Yes, and a disconnected am does not offer a choice. It doesn't connect two equal thoughts.
What does it do?
It functions as an entirely different vocabulary word. It essentially means bal, which translates to rather nay or on the contrary.
Okay, so the sentence isn't saying God is your ultimate protector, or do you want to go ask your messenger some questions?
Yeah. No.
It's actually saying God is your ultimate protector. Rather, do you really want to ask your messenger?
Precisely. The disconnected am acts like a knife. It completely severs the sentence from the previous soothing thought, and it aggressively starts a new, highly critical thought.
Let me put this into a totally mundane, everyday context, because it's the only way my brain processes linguistic shifts like this.
Go for it.
Think about how a parent deals with a kid who will not stop arguing about a rule. Let's say the kid's upset because bedtime was moved earlier.
A classic battle.
The parent starts out in the reassuring philosophical mode, the exact mode we just discussed. They say, look, this new rule is better for you. You need sleep for your big game tomorrow. I am your parent. I am taking care of you. I'm protecting you.
They are being the Wally.
Exactly. They're being the Wally. But the kid keeps whining, keeps demanding explanations, keeps negotiating. At a certain point, the parent hits that linguistic pivot point.
The tone shifts.
Their tone drops an octave. They stop explaining and they say, I am doing this to protect you. Rather, are you really going to keep arguing with me right now?
That analogy is spectacular because it perfectly captures the emotional weight and the power dynamic of this grammar.
It's a reprimand.
The text explicitly defines this exact shift in tone, and it uses a very specific Arabic term for it. Tabiq.
Tabiq. What does that translate to?
It translates to reprimand, or a severe rebuke.
Wow.
The text makes it clear that the divine voice literally shifts from an educational, philosophical explanation of why laws change into a direct, rhetorical reprimand of the audience.
It's drawing a line in the sand.
It's saying, we have explained the wisdom to you, we have reassured your anxiety. Rather, after all of that, are you still going to stubbornly demand arbitrary proofs from your prophet, just like the arrogant people of the past did?
It drastically raises the stakes. We are no longer in a theoretical classroom debating the nature of abrogation. We are in a courtroom, and the judge is issuing a warning.
And the text lays out the exact dire consequences of failing this test.
What are they?
If you cannot handle the dynamic, evolving nature of the divine law, and you continue to stubbornly demand that the universe conform to your rigid expectations, there is a penalty.
A heavy one, I imagine.
The text defines what's at stake as a catastrophic trade. The Arabic phrase used is yata badal al-kuf, exchanging belief for disbelief.
Yata badal. That word implies a conscious, active transaction.
Yeah.
You aren't just slowly losing your belief by accident because you're confused.
Yeah.
You are walking into a marketplace and actively swapping your belief out for disbelief.
Because you prioritized your own stubborn demand for static, unchanging rules over the dynamic wisdom of the protector.
Wow.
And the text describes the spatial result of this terrible trade. It says that the person who makes this exchange has strayed from the straight path, which in Arabic is sawa al-sabil.
I really want to focus on that phrase, sawa al-sabil, because when a Western audience hears the English translation straight path, we almost always visualize a line drawn with a ruler.
Right, a very rigid line.
A geometric straight line moving strictly from point A to point B.
Yeah.
If you're on the line, you're good. If you step off the line, you're bad. But the source text gives a much richer, much more spatial definition of the word sawa.
It does, and it changes the entire visual metaphor. The text defines sawa not as a geometric line, but as the absolute middle, or the dead center of something.
The center.
To prove this, the text cross-references another verse in the Quran that talks about a person looking into the middle of hellfire, and it uses the exact same word, sawa, to mean the center of the pit.
Okay, so the straight path isn't about rigid forward momentum. It's about maintaining dead center. It's about equilibrium. It's about balance.
Exactly. To stray from sawa al-sabil means you have abandoned the balanced center.
And what happens in physics when you leave the center of balance?
Yeah.
You hit the edges, you hit the extremes.
Yeah.
If the changing laws, the abrogation, are meant to keep a society perfectly balanced as their circumstances change over time, but you stubbornly demand that the rules remain static forever, you are the one who is going to fall off the edge.
Because rigidity becomes the extreme.
Exactly. Rigidity becomes the extreme.
And this beautiful concept of balance brings us perfectly to the core overarching theme of the entire text.
Which is?
The text calls this section the wajh al-irtibat, which means the connection to previous verses, and the al-mana al-imali, the general meaning.
Okay.
This is where the author zooms out, leaves the microscopic grammar behind for a moment, and looks at the entire sociological and theological ecosystem we've been navigating.
And the concept that anchors this entire macro ecosystem is a single, incredibly important Arabic concept called maslaha.
Maslaha. It translates broadly to welfare, public interest, or the greater good of humanity.
The text explicitly links the terrifying, anxiety-inducing concept of abrogation, changing the divine laws, directly to the evolving maslah of the human race.
Right.
It makes the bold argument that God changes his commands simply because the circumstances, the times, and the psychological realities of the people change.
So the law is not a rigid cage. It is a living, breathing, organic mechanism that adapts to the organism it is trying to regulate and nurture.
Yes. And this entire section of the text is methodically designed to totally dismantle the primary argument of the critics. Remember the critique we talked about earlier?
Skeptics.
The skeptics claim that if God changes his mind, it inherently proves he was ignorant of the future. If you knew this was going to happen, why didn't you just give us the final perfect rule on day one?
It's the ultimate why didn't you just get it right the first time argument. It assumes that a perfect being must produce a static, unchanging product.
And the text's rebuttal to this is brilliant. It argues that changing the law over time is not proof of ignorance. It is actually the ultimate, undeniable proof of absolute wisdom.
Exactly.
Because a static final law applied prematurely to a deeply flawed, evolving human condition doesn't create perfection, it creates oppression.
That is a profound point.
The text specifically states that God abrogates rules to lift heavy burdens off him, his servants, precisely when they are strong enough to stand without them, or to give them rules only when they are strong enough to bear them.
Using very evocative language.
It uses the highly evocative Arabic words aglal and asar, literal shackles and back-breaking burdens.
This touches on something so fundamental about human psychology and sociology. Think about the historical context here.
Okay.
You have the original believers in 7th century Arabia. They are a fractured tribal society, and they are being tasked with building a completely new, incredibly complex civilization from scratch.
Right. I keep coming back to the modern concept of information overload or cognitive burden.
Yes.
If you took the entire, finalized, highly complex legal and ethical code of a massive, mature empire, and you dumped it on a group of traumatized, developing people all at once on day one,
It would shatter them.
it'd be an unbearable cognitive and physical burden. They would collapse under the weight of it.
They would be completely paralyzed. And this aligns with a core principle of how human beings actually learn and grow.
Right.
Knowledge and rules are only valuable when they can be genuinely understood, internalized, and applied. If a highly advanced rule is forced onto a society before that society has developed the ethical infrastructure to understand it, it's not enlightenment.
It's just noise.
It's just noise.
Right.
Or, as the text says, it becomes an alal, a shackle.
So if a rule is no longer applicable to the human condition, or if a society outgrows the need for a specific training wheel, removing that rule is an act of ultimate wisdom.
Exactly.
It's not a glitch in the matrix.
No. If we connect this to the broader picture, the text is offering a very specific, highly empathetic analogy for how the believer should view the divine. It is asking them to stop viewing God as a rigid architect who builds a concrete house, hands over the keys, and walks away.
Okay, what's the alternative?
Instead, it asks them to view God as a master physician.
Oh, I love the physician analogy. Let's explore that deeply because it makes the concept of maslaha, of human welfare, so tangible.
Think about the reality of medicine. A masterful physician doesn't just look at a sick patient, hand them one pill, and say, take this exact dose at this exact time for the rest of your natural life, regardless of how your body responds or changes.
No, that would be malpractice.
It would be.
Right.
Yeah.
If you go to the doctor with a severe life-threatening infection, they don't give you a multivitamin. They give you a heavy, aggressive course of antibiotics.
Yes.
It's a harsh, intense rule for your body to follow. It has side effects,
Yeah.
but it saves your life in that specific moment.
Exactly. But what happens 2 weeks later when the infection is completely cleared and your body is healing?
Right.
If that doctor forcefully insisted that you continue taking those aggressive antibiotics every single day for the next 10 years, what would happen?
It would destroy your immune system. It would ruin your gut biome. The medicine that saved you on Tuesday becomes the poison that kills you on Wednesday.
The rule becomes a shackle. So what must the masterful physician do? They must abrogate the prescription.
Cancel the old rule.
They cancel the old rule. They replace it with something bikairin something better, perhaps a lighter regimen of probiotics or physical therapy. Now, is that physician contradicting themselves?
No.
Are they admitting that the antibiotics were a mistake?
Not at all.
No. They are demonstrating their absolute mastery of medicine by dynamically adapting the treatment to the evolving reality of the patient's healing process.
So the abrogation of the medicine is the proof of the physician's wisdom.
Yes.
That is incredibly clarifying. It makes total logical sense. But it also reveals the vulnerability in the system.
The trust factor.
Yes, because submission to this process requires an immense amount of trust. The patient has to trust that the physician knows what they are doing when they change the medicine.
And this is the massive turning point in our deep dive today.
What happens when they don't trust?
What happens when the patient absolutely refuses to trust the physician? What happens when the patient thinks they know better and they start demanding completely unreasonable magical proofs before they will swallow the new pill?
Well, that leads us out of the realm of pure theory and drops us right into the chaotic confrontational history of 7th century Arabia.
The historical drama.
Because the text doesn't just leave us with a beautiful medical analogy. It shows us exactly how real, flawed humans reacted to this shifting legal landscape.
The text provides what scholars call the sabab al-nuzul, which translates to the reasons for revelation.
The context.
These are not abstract concepts. These are the specific historical triggers, the actual arguments in the streets and marketplaces that prompted these verses about abrogation and the sharp reprimand to be spoken in the first place.
The source text gives us 3 distinct historical stories, 3 separate confrontations. Let's look at story A first.
Story A involves a specific faction of the Jewish community living in Medina at the time. According to the text, they were actively observing the Prophet Muhammad, watching the laws evolve, and they used the concept of abrogation as a rhetorical weapon to mock him.
Right, they were pointing at the changing rules, like a command regarding prayer or social conduct being given one day and a modified command being given a year later.
Yeah.
And they were using it to publicly humiliate him. They were saying, look at this man. He contradicts himself. He changes his mind from day to day. A real prophet wouldn't make mistakes. This just proves he's making the whole thing up himself.
It was a very pragmatic, deeply cynical political critique designed to undermine his prophetic integrity in the eyes of the public.
They were attacking the physician's credentials.
Exactly. But story B takes the historical narrative in a much more fantastical direction.
Story B is genuinely wild. This involves a group of the Quraysh, the wealthy, powerful ruling tribe of Mecca, who violently opposed the prophet. The text says they were led by a man named Abdullah bin Abi Umayyah. They march up to the prophet, and they aren't asking for theological explanations about human welfare. They are demanding cartoonish, literal miracles.
The text actually lists their demands, and the escalation is breathtaking.
It really is.
They start by saying they will not believe his message unless he forcefully makes springs of fresh water gush up from the dry, barren desert ground of Mecca.
Okay, water from a rock. It's a pretty standard classical miracle request.
Right, but they don't stop there. Then they demand that magical, lush gardens of palm trees and grapes just instantly materialize in the desert.
Yep.
Then they demand a house made entirely out of solid gold.
Gold house, check.
And it still doesn't stop. They demand that he physically levitate and fly up into the sky right in front of their eyes.
Flying, okay.
And even then, they add a caveat. Even if you fly up into the sky, we won't believe you unless you bring back down a physical, tangible book bound in pages straight from God that we can hold and read ourselves.
It's absurd. It reads like a petulant child listing off demands for a comic book superhero. Shoot lasers from your eyes. No. Lift that building. No. Fly to the moon.
It highlights the sheer absurdity of their negotiating position. They are treating the divine like a performing magician.
But story C is perhaps the most dramatic of all.
And it carries the absolute highest stakes.
I am utterly fascinated by story C. The text attributes this historical report to the scholar Mujahid. The leaders of the Quraysh approach the prophet with their ultimate challenge.
The big one.
They point out at Mount Safa, which is a very real, prominent, massive hill right in the center of Mecca, and they demand that he turn the entire mountain into literal solid gold.
The literal mountain of gold. It is the ultimate, undeniable, earth-shattering demand for material proof. If you can do this, the debate is over forever.
But here is the craziest part of the story. The prophet looks at them, And he agrees.
He says yes.
He says, yes, I will ask God to turn Mount Safa into gold. But before they can celebrate, he gives them a terrifying apocalyptic caveat.
He says, it will be like the table sent down to the children of Israel.
What does that mean?
He is referencing a much older story, the story of Jesus' disciples asking for a miraculous feast to physically descend from heaven. The prophet tells the Quraysh, if you ask for this ultimate, undeniable miracle and it is actually given to you, the veil is entirely lifted.
Oh.
If you still find a way to disbelieve or disobey after seeing a mountain turn to gold, you will be utterly and immediately destroyed.
He calls their bluff in the most spectacular way possible.
Yeah.
He says, you can have your undeniable proof. I will give it to you. But understand the cost.
The cost is total commitment.
If you get it, the era of testing is over. The era of the physician's mercy, the era of delaying punishment while you figure things out is permanently over.
Hey.
If you see a mountain of gold and still find some petty excuse to reject the law, your civilization is finished.
And what is the reaction of the Quraysh leaders when they hear this consequence?
Hearing this caveat, the text says the Quraysh back down. They immediately withdraw the request. They say, never mind. Which, I mean, that says absolutely everything about what they actually believe deep down in their hearts.
This raises a profoundly important psychological question. Why did they back down? If they were truly, genuinely seeking the truth, wouldn't they risk it?
You would think so.
The expert analysis here is that this moment perfectly unmasks the deep hidden psychology of these historical adversaries.
Right.
The text uses two very precise Arabic words to diagnose their mental state: taimanut and asikbar.
Let's define those, because I think they are the key to the whole story.
Taimanut means a willful, malicious stubbornness. It is the desire to create unnecessary difficulty.
To add faith.
Exactly. It's when a person asks a question not because they want to learn the answer, but because they are trying to trap the person answering. It's bad faith engagement. Istikbar, on the other hand, means deep arrogance or false pride.
Thinking you're above it all.
The belief that you are inherently superior to the person trying to guide you.
So they weren't actually seeking the truth at all.
Not for a second. They are acting exactly like the ancient followers of Moses. And the text explicitly draws this parallel. When Moses was trying to guide his people, they demanded to see God plainly with their own physical eyes before they would obey. Or they demanded to build a golden calf idol the second Moses turned his back.
They're asking these questions to constantly shift the goalposts.
Right.
They want to avoid accountability at all costs.
Because think about the logic of it. If the divine laws are always subject to your impossible magical demands, then you never actually have to submit to the laws.
Right. You have a permanent out.
You can always just shrug and say, well, I would be a good person, I would give to charity, I would stop exploiting the poor, but only if that mountain turns to gold first.
Until then, I don't have to change my behavior.
It is a delay tactic born entirely of arrogance.
And this connects so perfectly back to the grammar of rebuke we discussed earlier.
The tabi.
Yes, this is exactly why the text shifted to the disconnected am. This is why the divine voice pivoted to the tabik, the sharp parental reprimand.
It all comes together.
Because the overarching intelligence of the text is saying, I see exactly what you're doing. You aren't genuinely confused about why the laws are changing for your welfare. You are weaponizing the changing laws as an excuse to demand golden mountains, simply so you can avoid walking the balanced straight path.
It is a profound, devastating unmasking of the critics' true motives. They didn't actually want a perfect static law. They wanted an excuse not to submit to any law whatsoever.
Wow. Okay, I need to take a breath, because we have covered an immense amount of intellectual and historical ground today.
It's a dense text.
Let me try to synthesize this massive journey we've been on. We started by looking at the microscopic, granular roots of Arabic words. We looked at Naskh and explored the vast philosophical differences between erasing a memory, deliberately archiving a ruling for later, and temporally delaying a revelation.
We saw how a single word can hold a universe of debate about how human beings actually experience the mechanics of divine commands.
Then, we moved into the philosophy of better and the grammar of protection. We explored the concept of bikair and minya.
The idea that replacing a perfect rule doesn't mean the first rule was flawed.
Right, but that the application of the new rule is perfectly suited to a new season of human circumstance, like swapping a winter coat for a summer shirt.
And we learned about the Fa'il form,
The hyper-manager.
the intense, hyperactive grammar of God as an ultimate manager, the Wali, and an overwhelming assister, the Nasir, designed specifically to anchor the human psyche when the legal foundations around them are shifting.
From there, we hit that sharp linguistic pivot, the disconnected am, the sudden shift from soothing explanation to a direct rhetorical reprimand, warning the community against actively trading their belief for the destructive edges of the straight path.
We explored the grand thematic master plan, the concept of maslaha, or human welfare,
The master physician.
the beautiful empathetic analogy of the master physician who updates the heavy antibiotic prescription as the patient heals, proving infinite wisdom rather than ignorance.
And finally, we ended with the sheer chaotic historical drama of the 7th century.
Golden mountains.
The cynical mockery of the critics in Medina, the cartoonish demands for flying prophets and houses of gold in Mecca, and the ultimate high-stakes showdown over Mount Safa, which completely exposed the psychology of stubbornness and arrogance.
It truly is a masterclass in how an ancient text defends its own legislative integrity while deeply understanding the flaws of human nature.
So after all of this, what does this actually mean for you, the person listening to this right now? Because obviously you are not living in 7th century Arabia, and you aren't debating the abrogation of a new legal code with a prophet. How does this apply to modern life?
I think the core lesson here, the profound takeaway that completely transcends the specific theological and historical context we've discussed, is about the nature of true wisdom.
Right.
True wisdom involves recognizing when the circumstances of your life change and being genuinely open to updated understandings. It's about trusting the organic process of growth.
Rather than stubbornly demanding impossible miracles or rigid permanence just to justify staying stagnant.
Exactly. It's incredibly easy to fall into tatanut, that willful stubbornness, when our own internal personal laws are challenged by reality.
Which brings up a really provocative final thought for you to ponder as we wrap up. Think about the rules or the core foundational beliefs in your own life that have changed over the years.
Oh, that's a great question.
Think about the things you were absolutely 100% certain of 10 years ago that you now see completely differently because you've grown. When a deeply held rule of yours was essentially abrogated by a new life experience or a new perspective, how did you handle it?
Did you adapt or did you fight it?
Did you respond by seeking the underlying wisdom, accepting the new, lighter prescription from the physician of life? Or did you act like the historical critics we talked about today,
Yeah.
stubbornly demanding a mountain of gold before you'd admit it was time to change?
It is always much easier to demand a mountain of gold than it is to do the hard work of walking the balanced straight path.
It really is. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring. Imagine you are building a legal system from scratch.
Okay.
But not just any legal system, right?
Yeah.
You are claiming that this architecture is perfect, that it's eternal, and, well, handed down directly by God. So it's flawless by definition.
Right, the ultimate high stakes.
Exactly. Now imagine having to stand in front of all your followers just a few years later and tell them that you actually need to change a core rule.
Yeah, that is a tough sell.
It's a massive problem. I mean, how do you issue a divine software update without basically admitting that the original code was flawed? How do you change an eternal law without the entire authority of the system just completely collapsing?
It's wild to think about.
It really is. And that is the massive, incredibly delicate, and frankly, totally anxiety-inducing puzzle that we are unpacking today on the Deep Dive.
And it is arguably the most sensitive structural problem that any absolute system faces, And to explore it today, we aren't looking at modern corporate restructuring or constitutional law. We are diving into a really dense classical Arabic text on Islamic theology, specifically a source material that's titled The Concept of Abrogation and Prophetic Integrity in Islam.
And just to set the parameters for you, the listener, right out of the gate, this text is incredibly expansive. It covers so much ground.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
But our mission today is going to be hyper-focused. We are looking exclusively at the foundational opening of this material, so roughly the first 16% or so.
You're really putting on the brakes here.
Exactly, putting on the brakes to examine the sheer mechanics of how this text operates. Because before it even touches the beautifully poetic, deeply granular linguistic analysis of how divine laws are updated, which is a concept known as Naskh in Arabic, it does something wildly unexpected. It builds this massive fortress around the integrity of the prophets themselves.
which I think requires a brief but really crucial disclaimer before we get too deep into it.
Go for it.
As we unpack this, our objective is purely analytical. We are not here to debate theology. We're not endorsing specific religious beliefs. And, we are definitely not taking any partisan stance on the historical claims being made here.
Right. Neutral territory.
Exactly. Our goal is just to neutrally map out the internal logic, the rich linguistic roots, and the philosophical frameworks that are embedded in this specific source material. We want to understand how the authors of this text engineered a solution to a massive theological problem, and we want to understand it strictly on the text's own terms.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because the way this text begins is, well, it's honestly a masterclass in misdirection.
Yeah.
Or at least it feels that way to a modern reader, I mean.
It really throws you off balance.
Right. You pick up a text about the theory of changing divine laws, and you obviously expect a dry definition of jurisprudence, but instead, the opening pages launch into this fierce defense of a king from ancient accusations of sorcery.
Yeah, it starts by aggressively defending Prophet Solomon Suleiman, the son of David.
Which is just, why start there?
Well, it drops you right into the middle of a centuries-old cultural battleground. I mean, to understand why it starts there, you really have to understand the historical context the text is navigating. In the ancient Middle East, and persisting well into the 7th century Arabian context where the Quran was revealed, there is this vast circulation of lore.
Lore that the text specifically attributes to the children of Israel, right?
Exactly. And this lore claimed that Solomon's legendary power wasn't prophetic at all. They claimed his immense kingdom, and particularly his supposed control over forces of nature and these unseen beings called the jinn, was achieved through dark magic.
And the text doesn't just say, hey, for the record, that's historically inaccurate. It completely drops the hammer.
Oh, it does not hold back.
Not at all. It equates magic. The Arabic word they use is sir, directly with disbelief. It defines practicing magic as an explicit, undeniable exit from the fold of Islam. Therefore, it argues, no messenger of God could ever, under any circumstances, be described as a sorcerer.
Right, or as someone who commands the world through magical coercion.
Yeah. The text labels these ancient claims as ignorant and just a complete deviation from what they call the straight path.
Because the text is establishing a very rigid dichotomy here. It states that the jinn were subjugated to Solomon exclusively by the direct command of God. Solomon didn't cast a spell.
He didn't have a wand.
Exactly. No wand, no secret incantations. He was merely the conduit for a purely divine act.
So why start a really dense legal treatise there? What does defending a historical figure from rumors of sorcery have to do with updating a legal code? I mean, let me float a modern equivalent for you.
Play it.
If you are downloading a massive system-altering operating system update onto your device, before you let that new code completely rewrite your core functions, you need absolute assurance that the developer isn't a hacker.
Right, you need a secure connection.
Exactly, a secure connection. And by separating Solomon's miracles from magic, this text is effectively authenticating the divine source code. It is declaring that prophetic power is a strict delegation of divine authority, entirely separate from any kind of human manipulation.
I love that secure connection analogy. It works perfectly because it highlights the vulnerability that the text is actively trying to patch. Let's dig into the why of this opening. Why is magic considered such an existential threat to a legal system?
Right.
If prophets were actually magicians, it would imply that human beings, through study or secret knowledge or dark arts, could tap into the supernatural, that they could share in God's power to affect reality. It decentralizes power entirely.
But doesn't that sort of imply that text is just worried about competition? Like, I don't know, a monopoly trying to shut down rival businesses?
Well, it's deeper than just silencing competition. It's an existential threat to the very concept of absolute monotheism. Think about it. If human magic works, and human magic can alter reality, then who is to say a human magician couldn't just invent their own divine update?
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
If a prophet is just a really highly skilled wizard, then a change in the divine law isn't a holy abrogation at all. It's just the wizard trying out a new spell to manipulate the masses.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So if the prophetic source is compromised by even a tiny hint of human agency or magic, the entire concept of a divine update just collapses. Anyone with enough esoteric knowledge could claim to abrogate the law.
Precisely. The text insists that only God influences reality at that fundamental architectural level. A prophet is a messenger. They are a terminal displaying the code, not an independent programmer writing it.
So by aggressively clearing Solomon of these charges of sorcery, the text seals the system's integrity. It proves the developer is singularly divine.
Yes, you literally cannot introduce the concept of Naskh God changing the law until you have definitively proven that no human being possesses the power to tamper with reality in the first place.
Which sets the stage perfectly. The text has built its fortress, the communication channel is absolutely pristine, the prophets are entirely secure conduits, and now, and really only now, can it tackle the big, complex question.
The core issue.
Right. What actually happens when a divine command needs to change? This is where we enter the concept of Naskh, or abrogation. And the text does this through a really deep, meticulous linguistic analysis of the word Naskh, as it appears in the Quranic, verse 2, 106.
And this linguistic transition is really where the classical scholars demonstrate their brilliance, because they don't rely on abstract philosophical definition.
No, they get super grounded.
Extremely grounded. They look back to the Bedouin Arabs, the original unadulterated speakers of the language, and examine how the root of this word was used in harsh, everyday desert survival. And from that, they identify 4 highly tactile physical meanings for the root of Naskh.
And the very first meaning it presents, al-izala, or removal, is grounded in an image that is just breathtaking. The text notes that the Arabs would look out at the desert and say, "The sun naskhed the shadow. The sun removed the shadow."
It's beautiful. The environment dictated their vocabulary. It's a very visceral, observable understanding of change.
But let's linger on that metaphor for a second, because this is where a 7th century linguistic root offers a truly profound psychological insight into the idea of changing laws. Think about the sun removing a shadow. It completely reframes the idea of a law being canceled. Because if God cancels a law, the human instinct is to immediately think, oh, God made a mistake with the first law and had to fix it.
Right, that it was an error.
Exactly. But the sun doesn't destroy the shadow. It doesn't violently attack the shadow because the shadow was somehow wrong.
That's a crucial distinction. It really is.
The sun simply displaces the shadow naturally as the day progresses. The shadow served its exact necessary purpose for that specific time of the morning, providing necessary coolness or cover for travelers.
Yeah.
But as the day moves into a completely new phase, the light naturally overtakes it.
Right.
The text is using the Arabic language to tell the reader that an abrogated law wasn't an error. It was the perfect shadow for its time, and the new law is the perfect light for the new time.
And building on that natural progression, the text then layers in 3 more definitions that actually shift away from the natural world and into human society. The second meaning is al-naful, or transfer. This is akin to copying a manuscript.
Like transcribing.
Yeah, you are moving the contents, the essence of a truth, from one physical location or application to another. The data survives, it's just the housing that changes.
Then there's the third meaning, al-tabdil, which means replacement or exchange. And the text used the example of a judge here. Like, a judge changes a ruling or substitutes one parameter for another based on evolving circumstances or new evidence.
Exactly. And finally, the fourth meaning is al-tawil, transformation. The scholars liken this to the passing of an inheritance. The wealth moves from one generation to the next. The custodianship transforms, but the fundamental value remains completely intact.
So we have this deeply layered understanding, right? Natural displacement like the sun, preservation like copying a book, contextual updates like a judge's ruling, and generational transformation like an inheritance. It's incredibly expansive.
Very poetic.
But then the text pulls a fascinating maneuver, because after giving us all this beautiful, expansive poetry, it pivots to a devastatingly strict legal definition.
Yes, it really narrows the focus. The text highlights a specific definition chosen by a prominent scholar named Ibn al-Hajib. Out of all the sprawling, heavily debated definitions proposed by various jurists across centuries, Ibn al-Hajib's is singled out for being the most comprehensive and concise.
And what was his definition?
He defines Naskh in the Sharia, in the strict legal context, as the lifting of a Sharia ruling with a later Sharia evidence.
The lifting of a Sharia ruling with a later Sharia evidence. Wow. It is so incredibly clinical. I mean, it strips away all the poetry of the sun and the shadows completely.
It does.
But why that definition? Like, what was the debate that Ibn al-Hajib was trying to settle by making it so incredibly rigid?
Well, to understand the genius of Ibn al-Hajib's definition, you really have to look at what he is actively excluding. Because in the centuries of Islamic jurisprudence, there was massive friction over how laws could evolve. I mean, could a divine ruling be lifted by a consensus of scholars?
Right.
Could it be lifted because the cultural norms of a newly conquered territory had changed? Could human rationale or logic or public interest just override a text?
Ah, okay. So other jurists might have been trying to leave the door cracked open for human adaptation.
Exactly. They wanted some flexibility. And Ibn al-Hajib just slams that door completely shut.
Yeah.
By defining it as the lifting of a Sharia ruling with a later Sharia evidence, he is building an impenetrable fortress around the divine law.
No humans allowed.
None. A law cannot be abrogated by human logic. It cannot be lifted by the changing opinions of a society or by a king's decree. It can only be overwritten by a piece of explicit divine text that chronologically follows the first one.
It creates a perfectly closed loop. And this circles us all the way back to why they had to defend Prophet Solomon in the opening pages, right?
There's the connection.
If a prophet was a magician, or if human cleverness could somehow manipulate divine reality, that closed loop would be shattered. Ibn al-Hajib is demanding that the jurisdiction of changing God's law belongs exclusively to God.
The structural integrity is absolute. Only the divine developer can issue the patch.
Okay, so if we accept Ibn al-Hajib's closed loop, the idea that only God can overwrite God, that immediately creates a massive logistical problem for the believers on the ground.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if a new rule comes down from the divine, what are the people supposed to do with the old rule that is still sitting right there in their heads? You can't just have two contradictory divine commands floating around a society simultaneously.
No, it would be chaos.
Right, and this is where the text moves to the next phrase in the Quranic verse, exploring the verb nusia.
Which takes us entirely out of abstract legal theory and plunges us directly into the psychology of the human mind. The verb nuncia derives from the Arabic root nisyan, which at its core basically means forgetting. And the text outlines how classical scholars grappled with this profound and, frankly, startling concept of God actively causing a ruling or a verse to be forgotten.
And the text provides two primary interpretations of this root. So let's look at the first one, which is attributed to the early scholar Qatada. He leans into the most literal translation possible. He interprets nuncia as literal active erasure.
Total removal.
Yeah, removing the text entirely from the hearts, the memories, and the daily recitation of the people, like a complete divine memory wipe.
Literally deleting the data from the human hard drive. It's intense. But then there's a second interpretation, famously championed by Ibn Abbas, which takes a very different path. He argues that the word draws from a secondary meaning of the root Nisian, which is intentional abandonment.
So not forgetting.
Right. It's not that the believers literally lose the memory of the words. Rather, the command itself is left behind in practice. As Ibn Abbas puts it, we leave it so we don't change it or abrogate it.
Oh, I see. So the text is preserved as a historical artifact, but its legal power is just turned off. And the linguist Al-Azhari actually backs this up, noting it means commanding that the practice be left alone.
But the linguistic complexity doesn't even end there. The text introduces a completely different phonetic reading of the Quranic word itself. Based on established sciences of Quranic recitation, there is an alternative vocalization that includes a glottal stop, a hamza, changing the word to nansa-aha.
Which changes the entire root of the word. It's no longer from nisian, meaning forgetting, but from nasa, which means to delay or postpone.
Right, so now the scholars have three distinct concepts to wrestle with: literal erasure, intentional abandonment, and temporal delay.
That's a lot to reconcile.
It is. And the scholar Al-Alusi steps into this fray to do exactly that. He suggests these aren't contradictory ideas, but rather different mechanisms of the exact same divine will. Delaying could mean keeping the text in the divine realm, the preserved tablet, so it is never revealed to humanity in the first place. Forgetting, on the other hand, could mean removing it from the human mind post-revelation.
Okay, I have to jump in and heavily push back here.
Sure.
Because this is where the text gets incredibly uncomfortable for a modern reader. The idea of a divine power literally erasing a text from human memory. I mean, it sounds deeply deceptive. It feels like theological gaslighting, quite frankly.
I can see why you'd say that.
You reveal a truth, people build their lives around it, and then flashing Men in Black memory wipe them. Why would a supposedly perfect eternal system ever need a manual erase function?
That reaction is completely valid, and it's a friction point that scholars have heavily debated for centuries. It looks like deception to a mind that expects a static, unchanging universe. But consider the alternative the text is proposing. By introducing the mechanisms of intentional delay and active erasure, the text is revealing a surprisingly sophisticated view of human sociology.
How so?
It suggests that human beings are simply not hardwired to handle absolute truth all at once.
I hear the argument that it's about human capacity, but who gets to decide what that capacity is? If I'm a 7th century believer going through this, I might really resent being treated like I don't have the mental fortitude to hold two concepts in my head.
But look at the historical reality of what early Islam was attempting to do. It wasn't just introducing a few new rituals here and there. It was attempting a total ground-up demolition and reconstruction of an entire society's economic, social, and moral framework.
It was a massive overhaul.
Absolutely massive. If you are trying to reform a society embedded in tribal warfare and deeply entrenched social hierarchies, and you drop the entire finalized, incredibly demanding legal code on them on day one, the system crashes.
The cognitive load would just be way too high.
The cognitive and societal load, people would simply reject it. So information, even divine information, must be dispensed or intentionally withheld based on the specific localized bandwidth of the population at that exact moment in time.
Okay, so delaying revelation makes sense. You wait until they are ready. I get that. But what about the erasure part? Why reveal it, let them practice it, and then actively erase it from their memory?
Think about it through the lens of paradigm shifts and, well, muscle memory. Sometimes, for a society to successfully adopt a vastly superior but vastly more difficult paradigm, the old paradigm cannot simply be debated. It must be completely eradicated from the collective consciousness.
Oh, interesting.
Because if you leave the old, easier rule lingering in the collective memory, human nature dictates that people will inevitably revert back to it the exact moment the new rule becomes difficult.
Ah, I see. Like trying to learn a complex new golf swing.
Yeah.
The coach doesn't just show you the new swing, right?
Yeah.
They have to actively work to help you forget the deeply ingrained muscle memory of your old, flawed swing. Because under pressure, your body will always default to what it remembers.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. In this framework, the divine erasure isn't gaslighting at all. It's a necessary mechanism of mercy to ensure the progression of the society doesn't just fail under the weight of its own nostalgia.
That reframes it entirely.
Yeah.
The forgetting is a structural necessity for progress. But, even if we understand it logically, the emotional reality of living through that kind of paradigm shift is brutal.
It is terrifying.
If you tell an audience that the very bedrock of their divine laws might be removed, replaced, or literally scrubbed from their memories, you're going to trigger a massive existential anxiety.
Wow.
Institutional instability is terrifying for anyone.
And that is exactly the anxiety the text anticipates and immediately addresses. The authors and the text they are analyzing, they know that if the ground is shifting beneath the believer's feet, they are going to experience vertigo.
For sure.
So it doesn't just leave them hanging in the void of erased memory. It immediately follows the concept of Naskh and Nuncia with a rock-solid, non-negotiable guarantee.
The guarantee arrives in the very next phrase of the Quranic verse, Bikayadin Minya, which translates to, with something better than it. Now, any politician or corporate executive will tell you that a new policy is quote-unquote better. But better is a highly subjective word.
Right, totally.
How does this specific theological text define what makes an updated divine law better?
The text is meticulous here. It clarifies that better fundamentally means superiority in terms of ease and lightness for the people.
That is fascinating. The divine definition of an upgrade isn't necessarily more complex or more rigid. It is fundamentally defined by making the human experience lighter.
Yes, but the classical scholars knew that lighter isn't always straightforward. The scholar Al-Qurtubi is brought in here to really unpack the multidimensional nature of this benefit. He argues that better manifests in one of three distinct ways.
Let's hear him.
First, the most obvious one, short-term benefit. The new rule is literally easier to perform in this physical life than the old one.
So it requires less time, less wealth, or maybe less physical strain.
Exactly. Very practical. But his second definition flips that entirely. He says the new rule might actually be harder. It might require more sacrifice, more time, or more resources. But it is still better because it yields a disproportionately greater spiritual reward in the long term, in the afterlife.
It's an investment strategy. You pay more up front right now, but the compound interest on the back end is vastly superior.
Spot on. And his third definition covers the middle ground. The new rule is exactly equal to the old one in terms of difficulty and reward, but it is better because it is perfectly calibrated to a new context or a new societal reality that the old rule could no longer address.
Think about the real-world application of this. I mean, when a major institution, a university, a global corporation, or a government announces a fundamental policy change, the immediate human reaction is panic.
Always.
Employees assume change means more work, fewer benefits, or layoffs. People hate systemic change. But this text preempts that exact psychological panic by issuing a binding divine guarantee. The update is always an upgrade. Even if it looks harder in the moment, the architecture is structurally designed for your ultimate benefit.
And then the text seals this entire theological argument with a brilliant, deeply comforting rhetorical flourish. It concludes the verse and this specific section of linguistic analysis by invoking two very specific names or attributes of God, Wali and Nasir.
Wali and Nasir.
Exactly. The word Wali is deeply intimate. It is defined as the close friend, the protector, or the guardian who takes total overarching charge of your affairs. It implies a macro-level management of your well-being. Nasir, on the other hand, is defined as the active helper or aid. It is the entity that literally rolls up its sleeves and assists you in the micro-execution of the task.
So you have the CEO managing the massive paradigm shifts from the top, ensuring the trajectory is safe, and you also have the manager down in the trenches with you, helping you actually do the daily work.
It covers both the strategic and the tactical perfectly. But the real depth here lies in the grammar. The text specifically points out that both of these words are in what Arabic grammar calls the fi'il form.
Okay, we are going deep into linguistics now. What does the fi'il form actually do to a word?
The fi'il grammatical form is an intensifier. It implies an exaggerated, continuous, almost overwhelming level of whatever the root action is. So Wali isn't just a guardian. It is an entity whose very essence is characterized by unceasing, intense protection.
Wow.
And Nasir isn't just someone who helps you once and leaves. It is continuous, disproportionate, active assistance.
The ultimate unceasing guardian and the ultimate unceasing helper. So let's connect this entire journey back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
The text is essentially saying, yes, the rules are going to change. Yes, the legal and social landscape will shift beneath your feet. You might even be subjected to a paradigm shift so intense that you are made to forget the things you thought were foundational to your reality.
But you don't need to panic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You do not need to panic because the ultimate policymaker orchestrating this chaos is not a distant, cold algorithm. It is your most intimate guardian and your most unceasing active helper.
It is a breathtaking piece of rhetorical engineering, honestly. The source text takes what is objectively a highly controversial, inherently destabilizing theological concept, the reality that absolute divine laws can be overwritten, and it entirely deconstructs the fear surrounding it.
It really does.
By wrapping the cold mechanics of legal change about these profound, emotionally resonant reassurances about the nature of the one making the change, the text demands total trust. It successfully transforms what a skeptic might see as divine inconsistency into the ultimate manifestation of divine care and contextual mercy.
It's like going into a terrifying surgery. The text is telling you, listen, the procedure is going to be intense, the structure of your body will be altered, and thanks to the anesthesia, you might not even remember how it happened.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be afraid, because the surgeon holding the scalpel is your absolute best friend, and their only goal is your ultimate healing.
That synthesis captures the exact emotional resonance the authors of this text were aiming for.
Well, this has been an absolutely incredible journey through just a fraction of the source material. We've traversed from ancient Middle Eastern lore to the deepest mechanics of human memory and linguistic structure. Let me bring all these threads together to sort of summarize the path we've taken today.
Sounds good.
We started by examining how the text aggressively exonerated the source of the message defending Prophet Solomon from accusations of sorcery to prove that prophetic power is a secure, untampered, purely divine channel.
A necessary prerequisite for any closed legal loop.
Right. From there, we dove into the beautiful tactile world of early Arabic vocabulary, picturing the sun naturally, gently displacing the shadow as a metaphor for how divine laws evolve and replace one another.
So poetic.
And then we wrestled with the intense philosophical and psychological friction of nuncia, exploring how delaying or even intentionally erasing knowledge from a society might not be an act of deception, but a necessary mercy calibrated to human capacity.
Protecting the system from crashing under its own cognitive load.
Exactly. And finally, we ended on the text's ultimate promise, that every shift, every abrogation, and every forgotten rule is fundamentally an upgrade, backed by the unceasing, exaggerated protection of a guardian who manages both the macro strategy and the micro execution of your life.
It leaves us with a profoundly dynamic view of a system that most people just assume is rigidly static.
So I want to turn this directly to you, the listener. The concepts we've unpacked today aren't just ancient theology. They are frameworks for navigating change.
Absolutely.
The next time you face a massive restructuring at your company or a sudden unexpected shift in your own life's trajectory that makes you feel completely unmoored, I want you to think about the linguistic roots of Naskh. When your personal paradigm shifts, is it just a chaotic, terrifying mistake? Or is it possible that it's just the sun, naturally and necessarily, removing the shadow to make way for a completely new phase of your day?
And as you reflect on the necessity of moving forward, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to really mull over on your own. Something that builds heavily on our debate over Nuncia, the concept of intentional forgetting.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We've seen how meticulously this ancient text analyzes the profound protective utility of allowing information to be erased so a society can progress. It makes you wonder, in our hyper-modern age, where every text message, every photograph, every old opinion, and every past mistake is stored in an endless, permanent digital architecture, have we lost something vital to our development?
Oh, wow.
In our relentless technological quest to remember everything forever, have we inadvertently destroyed the necessary, perhaps even divine utility of simply being allowed to forget?
We spend so much time trying to preserve every single shadow, but maybe the most profound growth only happens when we finally let the record fade.